Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are all doing really well. So we are full swing into October, and I hope you guys are all enjoying your spooky season so far. And of course, Halloween season can be pretty overwhelming for a lot of us. So just make sure that you're pacing yourself and drinking lots of water and resting when you're supposed to, so that you can make the most out of this amazing season. So today I wanted to wrap up my September reads. And September was a little bit of a weird month for me. I had 2 DNFs, which usually I don't have 2 in the run of a month. And I had some books that I really loved, some books not so much, and some that were right in the middle. So it was kind of a mixed bag of everything, so we're gonna get right into it and I'm gonna review what I read. So I started off September actually wanting to do a little bit of another month of religious horror. That was my plan. And I had done a month of religious horror back in May and I really enjoyed it. So if you missed that, I will have the link down below to that video because it was so much fun. We watched a lot of religious horror movies and I read a lot of books, and even, you know, doing the video of my wrap up was super fun. So I'll leave that link down below. And I kind of wanted to, you know, just reignite the spark of all of that and continue reading some religious horror. And it got off to a really rough start. So I did read some religious horror books in September, but 2 of them ended up being a DNF. So one of them, you know, was something that I wasn't really sure that I was going to expect, and the other one I was super disappointed. So the first DNF that I had was The Sentinel by Jeffrey Convitz, and this really has the kind of description that it was so much like Rosemary's Baby. The synopsis was so much like Rosemary's Baby that I was really hoping to have another book that I enjoyed as much as I did that one, because I loved Rosemary's Baby when I read it back in May. I read the book and then we watched the movie and it was so much fun. I think probably Rosemary's Baby is going to be on my top books of the year. So again, I was kind of hoping to reignite that spark, and this one is very similar. It's about this young actress who moves into an old brownstone apartment that she just has to have, and you know, the place is kind of old, has a bit of history. There's an old blind priest that kind of just stares in through the window every day, who's on one of the upper floors, and there's some kind of weird characters hanging around. So I was really hoping for the same sort of feeling that I got when I read Rosemary's Baby, and I was so disappointed with this one because it just, I don't even know how far I was into it, about 20% I think. I was reading it on my Kindle. I was about 20% in, and I didn't care. I didn't care about the main character. I didn't care about what she was going through. I found that it was repetitive and then it was super boring. And like, even up to 20% of the way in, like nothing was really happening and the story really hadn't even started. So I was like, you know what? You know, I've kind of come to the conclusion that there's way too many books out there that I want to read, that if I'm not enjoying something, I'm just going to put it aside because I don't want to drive myself into a reading slump. So I did put this one aside, but I do know that there's a movie adaptation of this, so I might give that a try. Some people that I know have watched the movie and have liked it, so I might give that one a go later on this year, again in movie form. And then the other DNF I had was super disappointing, and I was really upset about it, and for 2 reasons. Number one, because I was actually leading a buddy read of this book, and number 2, it's because it's by the same author of my favorite book of all time, which is The Exorcist. So I ended up DNFing Legion by William Peter Blatty. So if you don't know, this book follows the detective investigator that's in The Exorcist, but he's solving another murder that has religious overtones as well. And like I said, I was leading a buddy read on Instagram with this one as well. And I was so excited to read this book. I loved Blatty's writing in the first one. It was fast-paced and interesting, and it kept my attention. And even if I hadn't enjoyed the Exorcist movie, I think I still would have enjoyed the book. And this one just didn't do it for me. I think I was about between a third to halfway through, and I said to my friends that I was reading with, I was like, you guys, like, I can't do it anymore. I've got to put this one down. And funny enough, we had already been having a conversation about like how we weren't really enjoying it, like none of us were really enjoying it, and I was like, you know what, I just gotta put it aside. My friends Jackie and Edie Lewis, I believe both of them did finish it, and they continued the conversation, which was great. So the first thing is, when you're leading a buddy read or like a book club or whatever, you kind of feel bad if you're going to DNF a book, but the group was small enough that I was like, you know what, I know the guys will understand. And the other thing is, like I said, I love The Exorcist so much, but this one, the detective in here, who was very straight and to the point, very strong character in The Exorcist, was just, he was so unlikable. I hated him in this book, and he would go on these long tangents of just blithering about nothing that had to do with what the conversation was about. And it was kind of like unhinged a little bit with what he was saying. And I was like, you know, I'm really not enjoying this. It's just, I don't know, it's taking too long to get back around to talking about the murder. Like every time it would veer away from the main plot of the book, it was getting too long when it would wrap around to that again, and then these kind of babbling tangents that the detective would go on. He was super unlikable. He was very sarcastic and just mean, and I don't know, I couldn't do it. And it's so funny because I love detective type stories, I love true crime in my horror, and but this one was just a no-go. If you want to read a good detective sort of crime horror novel, Take Your Turn Teddy by Haley Newland is really good, and I was hoping for the same sort of feelings that I had with that one with this one, and unfortunately it just didn't work out. So the other two guys in the group, they did finish it, and they said, you know, it did start to get better somewhat afterwards, but I just wasn't willing to stick with it, unfortunately. And then the next book that I read was Come Closer by Sarah Gran, and I had heard a lot about this book between BookTube and Bookstagram. A lot of people really enjoyed this book. I read this one on audio, and it's about a young woman basically who's slowly, like over time, becoming possessed, and she's noticing the changes in herself. She's losing time, and she's blacking out, she's fighting with her husband, and all of this kind of stuff. And of course it has that sort of pull between, is she possessed, or is this like a mental illness? Is this something else going on? Is it something medical? And I really like that angle in possession stories. And this one was just okay for me. I would say this was a 3-star read. This was the first book this month that I actually ended up finishing, and I did enjoy it. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as some other people. For me, it was, you know, pretty much your standard run-of-the-mill possession versus mental illness story. So, but all in all, I mean, it was well written, it was an enjoyable story. I read it to the end, and yeah, I would definitely recommend everyone picking it up if you're into religious horror. It's definitely one to put on your list. And next up, I read The Omen by David Seltzer, and of course this is the novelization of the movie, and I've only ever seen the remake from 2006 of The Omen. I actually haven't seen the original, which is really weird. So I have to say that I enjoyed this book, first of all, because it follows very closely to the story of the remake. And I'm sure probably follows very closely to the story in the original movie as well. Something that I didn't know, and it's funny that I didn't realize this, but the book is actually a novelization of the movie. I thought the movies were based on the book, and that's not the case. So this was a really enjoyable read because there wasn't a whole lot of deviation between the two adaptations. And the other thing that I really enjoyed about this is you got a lot of backstory with Catherine, why she is the way she is, why she is acting the way she is towards Damien and the relationship between her and her husband, and there's a lot of backstory with the priests that are involved in the situation with bringing Damien into this family. So I really enjoyed this. This was a solid like 4.5-star read for me. I really liked getting the backstories to bring everything full circle of like why things happened and filling in the gaps, and I have like, you know, a better understanding of this thing as a whole. And when I watch the movie again, I will definitely be able to appreciate a little bit better of why things are happening. So I would, if you've watched the movie, I would definitely recommend reading the book if you haven't already, and getting those gaps filled in. It was really good. It was super gruesome in a couple of areas, actually. There were a couple of times that, like, you know, it was a little on the brutal side, but it definitely all fit within the story. I thought it was really well done, and like I said, solid 4 to 4.5 star. And then next I read Ball by Robert R. McCammon, and I hadn't read any McCammon before, and I was kind of influenced, I guess, into finally picking up one of his books by my friend Kelsi at Slime and Slashers. Boy's Life is one of, if not her favorite book by him, and I've heard from a lot of people that his writing is very good. His books are very good, and this one, I didn't realize when I first picked it up that this was his very first book that he ever wrote, which I thought was super interesting, and I thought it was a great place to start. The other thing is that McCammon's books can be very long, so it was kind of nice to start with one that was a little bit shorter, and then I can get into some of the longer ones down the road. So if you don't know what this one is about, basically Ball is a demon or a god type figure who comes into Earth, and he's hell-bent on basically destroying mankind and possessing people and, you know, all of that sort of thing. So throughout the book, it takes place in several different timelines and several different areas around Earth, basically, several different countries. And I have to say that this book really started off with a bang. Sorry if you can hear water running in the background. My husband is in the shower. So yeah, this one really started off with a bang. It was right out of the gate. It had me captured. It was brutal. It was a great story for that first section, and I was blown away. I actually sent a message to Kelsi, and I'm like, oh my god, like, thank god I finally decided to pick up a McCammon book. I'm really enjoying this. And you know, his writing on top of just the story itself is very well done. It's I wouldn't say it's lyrical, it's just, it's beautiful writing. There's, at the beginning of the story, there wasn't a whole lot of fluff or filler or anything like that. It was told wonderfully. It was a great story, and this really was satiating my need for another religious horror that I hadn't experienced before. It wasn't just a straight possession story. So I really enjoyed that aspect. And then there were 2 other timelines that had happened after this first one that I really enjoyed. The second timeline, the story started to become a little bit long. He started to, I think, get a little bit, I don't know, there started getting a little bit of filler in there, and I was like, okay, like, let's move on to find out what's going on next. And then the third section of the book, where they're in another country and these men are like basically tracking him around the world to try to find him and destroy him. And by the time we got to the third section of the book, it had taken up, I think, 50% or more of the entirety of the book. So it really started to drag at the end. I was like, oh my god, like, this story, the final part of the story compared to the first section of the story, it was just way too long. He started to get too wordy, and, you know, I was starting to want to get to the end of the book, basically. But having said that, even though it did start to veer off a little bit, and of course, as his first book, other people have said, like, this is not his best work, and I can see why, but it still, to me, was a great book. It was great writing, and, you know, you could see that he had a lot of room for improvement, and I'm really excited to continue reading his books, because if the rest of them are better than this one, and I enjoyed this one as much as I did, you know, it's only going to get better from here. So for Ball, solid 4-star read. Absolutely. A lot of people said, you know, and they probably read other books by him first and then went to this one and said it wasn't as great and gave it lower ratings. But I think still, even though it was getting draggy at the end of the story, it still kept my interest. I still listened to it every single day on my commute, and it was really, really good. It was really well done. So I can't wait to pick up more Macabre, and I'll have to send a message to Kelsi and ask her what I should read next. And next up, I read The Only One Left by Riley Sager, and I don't read a whole lot of new releases lately. I try to stick to my vintage books and trying to get through the ones that I already have on my shelf. But I did sacrifice one of my audiobook credits to download this one because my very good friend Nakia from Nakia's Hideaway did a review of this book, and she was kind of feeling very much the same way about Riley Sager as I was, that she was kind of on the fence with him. It was kind of one of those iffy authors that either you really liked what he wrote or you didn't, and I wasn't sure. I do have a list of authors that, you know, have gone from people that, you know, I would consider on my top tier down to I'm not really too sure. So since I watched Nakia's review and I had heard so much about this book and people said, you know, Riley Sager is back, this is a great book, and I wanted to give this one a go. So if you don't know anything about this one, basically this is about an old lady, and in her younger years she supposedly killed her entire family, and it was a local legend. There were rhymes made up about her, so very much like a Lizzie Borden sort of story. Now she is elderly, you know, she was in her 70s or 80s, she's had a stroke, so she needs to have a nurse come in and take care of her, and she's basically confined to her mansion where these murders took place. So this young nurse who has a backstory of her own that's kind of intertwined in this whole thing goes and starts to take care of this elderly lady, and as time goes on she starts to divulge to her some secrets and some background about her when she was younger, about what happened with her family. So this whole murder mystery starts to unravel, while also you're hearing the backstories start to unravel about this nurse. And then the rest of the help in this old crumbling mansion also have their own thoughts and experiences with this old lady and what they think, and like these two people have been with her pretty much forever. And of course, in true Riley fashion style, this is twisty and turny, and things get revealed and you think you have everything figured out and you don't. And this was just a fantastic thriller. I haven't read a really good thriller in a while, and I really enjoyed this one, I have to say. I was listening to this one with my carpool buddy back and forth to work, and she was really enjoying it as well. And of course we had our own theories that we were talking about on the way to work, and sometimes we would pause the book and like have conversations about it. So it was a really great buddy read to do with her too, and talk about our theories and what we think is happening. So this one was a solid 5-star read. I loved this book so much, and I'm glad that Riley Sager's writing has definitely improved from a couple of mediocre ones that he's had recently, and I'm looking forward to reading what he has next. So this one, I think, unless I read a couple of bangers in the next few months, I think this one's going to be solidly on my top reads of the year. And then the next book that I read was one of the Creepover books. So I read There's Something Out There, and I had started this book a while ago and just put it down because I was reading other things, not because I wasn't enjoying it. And this was a great book as well. This was a solid 4-star read. So this is about basically a group of girls, and they think that there's something that's living in the woods that's called the Marked One. And it's supposedly a local legend, it's supposedly folklore, but the girls think that this creature is actually real, and they've had experiences with it. So I really enjoyed this because of the way that they kind of wrapped a whole folklore story into this kids book. So of course this is a middle grade book. If you've never heard of the Creepover series, this is a great middle grade series, and basically each one takes place during a sleepover and spooky things start to happen. So if you're wondering, this one is a number 4 on the creepometer, so this one's pretty scary, I have to say. This one, there were a couple of places where I was like, wow, this is actually pretty scary for a kid's book, and that was great. So these books do have a creepometer on the back, so it's between 1 and 5. So this one was Sleep with the Lights On, and this one has to be towards the top of my list in the ones that I have read so far. It's not my favorite, but it's definitely up there. This is number 5 in the series, and I love these books. They're only about 100 to 125 pages. This one's 141, and they're really great stories. They're super spooky. So if you have kids at home or you're a kid at heart, I would definitely recommend these. So I don't know if I said my rating. This was a solid 4-star read as well. So I really enjoyed this one. And then the last book that I read was Autumncrow High Fresh Hell by Chaney. And I was gonna do my review of this one as part of this video, but I think I'm gonna, because this video is actually already kind of long, I think I'm gonna save my review for its own video for this one, because I want to make sure that I give you all of my thoughts on this, and I want to make sure to give Cameron all of my thoughts on this, and so you'll have to wait till the next video to find out if I like this one. So there you guys go. That was everything that I read in the month of September. Like I said, it was a bit of a mixed bag. I had 2 DNFs. The month got off to a really crappy start, and it kind of made me shift from another complete month of religious horror to just a partial month of religious horror, and then I moved on to something completely different, because we all have to stay out of those reading slumps, right? But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to give me a thumbs up, leave me a question or a comment down below, because you know I love chatting with you guys. But until next time, stay spooky, everybody. Bye.